How is...
Welcome to The Conversation. This is Blacks and Jews in Conversation, and my name is Shannon Taylor. And we have a special guest today. As you can see, it's John Markham representing the estates and the appraisal world. We are going to be facing, in the coming years, a great need to protect our elderly more and more, and to protect those becoming elderly in terms of their valuables. As theft continues, as you read about the atrocities of those who are supposed to care for our elderly, making off with their goods instead, as precious possessions are getting worn and torn, as homes debilitate, as property disappears. This is the guy to tell you how to protect all of that. And also, after your loved ones, or maybe not even your loved ones, but after parts of your family pass away and estates are left, this is also a person that I've come to know, who I value, whose opinion I value, whose expertise we value, who can tell you best what to do in terms of the general care of the estate and in preparation for estate sales, for instance. He's an expert I know in Westchester and elsewhere. He's been doing that for 35 years. We don't mean to sell his talents by any means. We, as usual, on this educational program, present him as an expert, as somebody with enough knowledge and enough experience to be able to guide you in planning against pitfalls in matters of ordinary life. And for those of you who would like to go into this career and who would like to go into a matter of life and death, literally, you can listen to him and be guided accordingly. And with that, John, thank you for coming on. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll go into the nitty-gritty.
Thank you for having me, Shannon. I've been a personal property appraiser for more than 35 years, and I have been a frequent lecturer for many organizations, and I did a number of years with lectures for the New York State school system. And with the campus-like buildings that they have in Westchester County with the large corporations in the past, I have been asked by the corporations to do lectures for the employees from time to time. These would be General Foods, Texaco World Headquarters, and Nestle, and a number of other organizations.
How does one become interested in the world of the dying and the almost dying and the decrepit and the sad and the ill? I don't mean in any way to denigrate this. I think it's an extremely noble calling. Religion would call it the highest calling. But how does one go into that field unless it is at the same time to study collections? Is that what it is? You study the collectibles and the collections and the past. What draws you into that?
Well, Shannon, first and foremost, I'm an appraiser. I'm not an undertaker. And it's secondary that I become involved with people who are aging and people who are in need and so on. And certainly I do get involved with that. But the primary reason that most people call me is to find out or to have appraised items that they feel may have some value. I personally got involved with it. I have been a collector since I was 16 years old, and I come from a family in background who were collectors and had large collections of antiques and art and things of that nature. And when I was about 16, I had a mad crush on an older woman who collected Chinese porcelain, and so my first collection was Chinese porcelain.
So then I'm right. I hit it on the head. It's the collections, it's the art, it's the collectibles. And from that, where would you find this but in homes and in estates? And listen, I've been to estate sales, and that's where you see all the treasures. But isn't it, I always think it's sad. And here's people, I think of my own impending demise. Here are people who spend their life collecting things which are treasures, and then they're ready to go. Nobody is going to take it, and it's left for strangers. Now, isn't that a sad commentary?
It can be a sad commentary, but actually, that is a very nice thing to happen. Someone who is willing to pay money for an item is bound to protect it because they have made an investment in it. Where sometimes things get passed down in families and they think nothing of them, and they end up in the attics of barns, or they end up in basements, or they end up being painted white after 200 years of life, or so many things can go wrong, or people can keep their pots of flowers on top of the beautiful Chippendale furniture and eat right into the finish, not only into the finish, but begin to rot the wood on the tops of the pieces. So I have a much more philosophical point of view about this. I think it's wonderful if an item finds a home with someone who is willing to protect it and is willing to enjoy it, because most of the things that we have around us were made for a purpose, or they wouldn't exist at all, and that purpose usually encompassed the joy of art as the person beholds it.
You mentioned that you were a lecturer for the New York State school system. We do a lot of that in our organization. We have dialogues, all kinds of holidays, and all kinds of commemorations and memorials and themes, slavery, Holocaust, civil rights, women's rights. What was your best attention? What was it? Was it collectibles? Was it this field? Or was it other fields? And what age groups did you best appreciate giving your wisdom to?
Well, with the state school system, it was mainly seniors, from middle age through seniors, and some of the seniors were quite senior. I cover, what I most often did was in the spring and in the fall, I would do a 6-part series, one day a week, one evening a week, one afternoon a week, depending on what it was, and they would be 2-hour sessions, and I would cover the gamut. And it would start out with topics such as how to find things, how to recognize things, how to find out what they are, how to take care of them. And I used to encourage people to bring things in and put them on the desk before we would begin a session. And that would very often affect the character of the session, because if I found that the items that had been put on the desk were of a certain character, even though I may not have planned to talk about that particular topic that evening, that would have presented the perfect time to do it. And a funny aside, at least I considered it a funny aside, I ended up with a bit of a following, and I had people who would continually sign up for the 6-part lecture. And when this happened, I was a little bit intimidated, because I wondered how, it being a general course, there were certain topics that I had to repeat to make sure that people had the basic knowledge with the new attendees. And I really felt that it was going to end up being boring for the people who had taken the series 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 times. However, that didn't seem to be the case. But one evening, I was talking to them about something that was on the desk, and I picked something up, and it was apparently of not any significance. And I said to the person, "This is really very interesting, but there is no market for it at the present time. Perhaps there will be someday, but thank you for bringing it in." And I noticed that a couple of the ladies who had regularly attended the session were laughing about something. And I asked them if they would share what was so funny, and they said they couldn't possibly. But on the way out that evening, I was walking beside one of them, someone I liked a lot, and I said, "Now, Kirby, what was so funny?" And she said, "Well, I don't know how to tell you this, but we have had a bet on for a long time that one night you're going to pick up an object and you're going to say, now who brought this piece of crap in? I wish you wouldn't mess up my desk. I'm happy to say that they lost the bet.
Do you find that in homes? Do you find that you go through some homes and you say, these people collected a lot of crap and now I got to figure out how I'm going to make the public interested? Or do you find that most people dispense with that at the time of the eventual sale?
Well, now you're talking about doing estate sales and things of that nature. Actually, the crap, excuse the expression, is an integral part of the tag sale business, because it's almost always bound to sell in great numbers, where the wonderful pieces in a house may be too expensive, they may not be understood by the general public, and so they help to defray the higher price that you had hoped to get for the better piece of furniture by adding in money for something that would sell in no other fashion.
What goes into preparation for an estate sale? How many days? Who do you have to talk to? And what goes into a reorganization of the house if that's necessary?
Well, the first step is usually a visit to the premises and meeting with the family that live there, an executor, an attorney, or whomever is the contact. And then I walk around and I look and I ask to be informed what is going to be included, what hasn't got a potential home, what isn't a legacy in a will. And then I determine, just first and foremost, if there is enough there to warrant having a professional involved. And if so, I rather quickly determine what is going to be needed time-wise, staff-wise, amount of security that may be needed, amount of advertising that may be needed, and I come up with a plan. But normally, most houses can be done within a 2-week period from beginning to end. And part of that 2-week period is caused by advertising deadlines for various publications.
And what about the staff? How many people do you need? How many experts do you need on the average? And does that depend on the size of the estate or the contents in terms of variety?
It can be determined by both. The size of the house would determine security needs and how many people we would need on staff. The variety of objects could cause me to rely on outside experts for some of those objects, because I am a general personal property appraiser. I am not what is known as a definitive expert. However, being someone who has regularly done this for so long, I am very, very capable of getting the opinion of the right definitive expert, because number one, I know in most instances who the expert is or who the experts are in that particular area. And also I am experienced enough that I can weed out the chaff in most instances, such as reproductions or things that are too damaged to be worth money, even though they may be of vintage character or unusual character or even rare character, but damage can be very much a deterrent to value. And therefore, when I call someone who might be a numismatist or someone who might be a specialist in books and manuscripts or someone who would be a definitive expert on a particular painter, I generally will be received rather quickly, not only because we've had contact in the past, but because they will realize that in more than 50% of the cases, it will not turn out that I've been wasting their time.
In terms of books, rare books or manuscripts, are you able to tell of yourself if it warrants having an independent book dealer come? Or do you rely on those, let's say, stamps, coins, comic books, do you rely on the individual family to reach out to those people, or are you able to of your own expertise of 35 years, make those decisions for recommendations?
I'm a book collector. I collect certain types of books, and I have a reasonably fair amount of knowledge about those areas. However, the first thing that I would point out when it comes to books, that the most common vintage article in most houses is a book. And it takes quite a lot for a book to be of value. Condition is a tremendous factor. If there's an odor of mold or must in the book, that will greatly affect its value, even though to the naked eye it might look to be in very good condition. 20th century books require their dust jackets to be of maximum value. In fact, a typical example of this is The Great Gatsby, which is a well-known book, and the first edition of that book is almost identical to the second edition, except for the fact that on a certain page there is a misprint in the first edition, and the misprint is, instead of saying sick and tired, the character says sick in tired in the script. I'm picking that as an example because I don't know current values on it. I haven't had to research it recently. But years ago, it was one of the hotter 20th century first editions. And there was a time that it was worth somewhere around $6,000 if it was in perfect condition and it had its dust jacket. But without its dust jacket and still in perfect condition, it was only worth $600 to $800. So it will give you a very good idea of how very, very esoteric the book business is. So therefore, if I think that there's likely to be, that there are likely to be some unusual books in a household, I usually will call in a book dealer to do a precursory check on what's there and to pull out for me what should be investigated further. Now, I don't expect him to spend hours and hours and hours unless it's a very important collection, and in that instance I would be paying him for his expertise. But rather, I want the protection of knowing that there isn't any obvious sleeper. But what the general public has to know is that for a book dealer, they're not really going to get too excited about, let's say, anything that's worth less than $200. And I'm being rather modest in that. As many people may know, this is not necessarily true of books, but as many people may know, the two major auction houses in New York don't want to take a single item that's worth less than $5,000.
Has it changed with regard to condition? Did it at one time have a market for not such great condition, and then somehow or other people who speculated made it imperative the condition be wonderful before it's valuable? At one time, I seem to remember that it was just the item that was important. If you had the item, condition was great if it was in good condition, but as long as you had the item, you had money. Now it seems that regardless of the item, it's the condition of the item. Was that a change that took place, or was it always the condition that was paramount, and there was no change over time?
Well, to a beginning collector, just the mere fact that they would have an article that is right, even if it has condition factors or is even badly damaged in some way, is a thrill in itself. But usually, for a sophisticated collector, condition is of paramount importance. Now, I have my own theory of why people begin to feel that something has to be close to perfect before they want to acquire it. And that simply is that there are a lot of old objects around, a lot of interesting old objects, many of which have condition factors. And the new collector, who gleefully is delighted to see something that he has viewed in a museum or he has read about in an antique book, or in many other ways has seen in elderly relatives' homes, to find something that he can include, if it was something that appealed to him, that he can include in his own home. And after a while, he finds that he has shelves full of these things. and he's running out of space. And the ones who are really profiting from his collecting are the carpenters and the building construction crews, who are constantly coming up with ways that he can store more and more of this object. And therefore, the first way of channeling or disciplining is to say, I will not get another item unless it's in perfect condition. And then I'll cull out something that is in poor condition.
So what do you recommend? If it's not in the best condition, you just dispose of it? Or you keep it for personal value?
Well, first and foremost, there's a value to an object outside of the monetary value or the art value, and that is sentimental value, so that if it's something that you really like, there isn't any reason that you should get rid of it. And in the estate sale business, you are likely to find new collectors and people who genuinely like articles of a certain character, whether or not they're damaged. I like to tell a story that there's a difference between a collector and an accumulator, but it is a very, very fine line. And my favorite story is a lady who goes to a psychiatrist, and as she's lying on his couch, she says to him, "Doctor, the reason I'm here is because I am crazy about pancakes." And so the psychiatrist says to her, "Well, there is really nothing the matter with that. I'm crazy about pancakes myself." The woman perks up, looks him in the eye, and says, "Well, you've got to come to visit me. I have 51 trunks full."
Oh, God help me if I ever opened up a trunk and found 51 pancakes, unless they were made out of all kinds of lapis lazuli and rhodochrosite or something like that. Well, I also note that you're involved in charitable organizations. Is that in terms of evaluating their various estates or holdings, or is that in terms of donating services?
I donate my services to them. I can donate my services by giving lectures if they want to have a lecture done as a fundraising medium. I donate my appraisal services to them. These are organized charities. They're recognized charities. And I donate a great deal of my clients' goods that have not sold to these organized charities. I've also gotten involved in actually working with them in a capacity other than my professional capacity. There are certain charities that I favor particularly, but I'm perfectly willing to help any charity as long as it's legitimate.
Well, we're a charity here. The Blacks and Jews in Conversation is a not-for-profit organization of many years. Unfortunately, we don't have a single thing that you could appraise of any value except our own persons. And maybe we should collect something or other. But if, by all means, if you come across things that people don't want and you can't sell them, let me know, and I'll come running. And don't tell my family and don't tell anybody else. Just let me know, because I'll come running, and we can start building a library, more than the few books we have, and who knows what else we can add, because we do a lot of work with students around the country and in all New York City schools. And who knows? Do you get a lot of stuff that is not sold, that is offered for donation?
Yes, Shannon, we get a lot of things for donation, and it isn't easy to donate things. Very often you need some pull with previous donations in order to get the attention of the various places that collect things, because they run out of space, or they don't have enough room in their conveyances to pick up everything, or they have so many calls at one time that they don't know who to go to first. But if you have a track record of having sent a lot of nice things their way, you stand a good chance of getting attention. On your end, as far as being offered things, I'd be delighted to offer you things, but I want you to realize there's a very old saying, be careful what you wish for, because you may get it.
I have learned the moral of that lesson time and time again. So that's why I just suggest let me take a look at it first. Maybe I'll bring a whole bunch of our members with me, but I'm sure that there must be something of great consequence to augment our dwindling supplies with, especially since we don't have a budget of any kind and haven't had one.
I think, Shannon, the best way would be when there were some people in need of a certain type of object, that you would let us know, and if indeed we had something that we could send, we would be very happy to do that. But the one thing that has to be is there has to be a way of moving it and picking it up. I cannot undertake doing that.
Don't worry about moving anything. I'll find the schleppers. We know schleppers all over the place. We can handle that. I want to thank you very, very much for coming on. This has been the second of two parts, and hopefully we'll see a lot more of each other, especially when you get wonderful items for us to grab a hold of, because we do great work around the country. We've been to over 60 universities. And I value your expertise tremendously. I've enjoyed meeting you and working with you, and I would enjoy doing so again. This is Blacks and Jews in Conversation, and wishing you happy holidays. Any final thoughts?
From me?
Yes.
Well, I'm just checking you out to see how saleable you'll be in another 10 years.
Prepare it now, you know. I'm ready now. Open the bucket as we speak.
Thank you, Shannon, for having me on.